Close your eyes if you'd like, or simply let your gaze go soft, resting on nothing in particular. Let your body settle. Let your shoulders drop. Let your hands rest where they are, open and easy. There is nothing you need to do right now, nothing to hold, nothing to figure out. For the next little while, you are simply here, listening and resting. Tonight we are going somewhere quiet and green and very old. Somewhere in the autumn countryside of Japan, where the bamboo grows in tall, dense groves that move in the wind with a sound like distant water, and the nights are cool and clear and full of the particular stillness that autumn brings, a stillness that is different from summer stillness, deeper and more settled, as if the world is beginning to prepare itself for something. There is a small house at the edge of a bamboo grove. There is an old man and an old woman, and between them, a child who came from the light inside a bamboo stalk, and who carries, without knowing it, something of that light still. And above the house, above the grove, above the autumn hills, the moon. Breathe in slowly, and let it out. Part 1. The Bamboo Grove. This is the story of the shining princess, and of the old man who found her, and of the autumn that was different from all the autumns before it. Let it carry you gently into rest. Bamboo grows differently from other plants, faster, more urgently, with a quality of vertical ambition that other plants do not have, pushing upward through the soil in a matter of days to heights that trees take years to reach. A bamboo grove is a particular kind of place, different from a forest in ways that go beyond the obvious difference in what grows there. The light in a bamboo grove is different, filtered through thousands of narrow leaves into something thin and greenish and moving, the shadows constantly shifting as the stalks sway, so that the light on the ground beneath them is never quite still. The sound is different too. Bamboo moves in the lightest breeze, and the sound it makes, the dry whisper of leaf against leaf, and the deeper creak of stalk against stalk, is one of the most characteristic sounds of the Japanese countryside, a sound that people who have grown up near bamboo groves hear in their memory long after they have left. The old man had a relationship with the grove that had developed over decades into something that was difficult to describe to anyone who had not had a similar relationship with a place. Not simply familiarity, not simply affection, but something more like the relationship between a person and a language they have spoken all their life, where the knowing goes so deep that it has stopped being knowledge and become instead a way of perceiving, a quality of attention that operates without effort and without the mediation of conscious thought. He knew when it was going to rain before any visible sign appeared in the sky, because the grove told him, not in words, not in any way he could have explained to someone else, but in the particular quality of stillness that preceded rain, the way the leaves hung differently, and the stalks moved in a different pattern, and the smell of the earth changed in a way that meant water was coming. He knew where the oldest parts of the grove were, the stands that had been there for 100 years or more, whose root systems ran deep and complex beneath the surface, and whose stalks had a different quality from the younger growth, a density, a slight resistance to the cutting tool, a color that was deeper and more settled than the bright green of newer stalks. He knew the places where the grove was thinning, where the soil was less rich or the water less available, and he tended these places with extra attention, sometimes bringing compost from the house to enrich the soil, sometimes clearing competing growth, doing the quiet maintenance work of someone who understands that the health of a thing requires ongoing attention, and that attention given consistently over time is more valuable than attention given intensively once in a while. In autumn, the bamboo grove takes on a particular quality. The light coming through it is cooler than in summer, the shadows longer, the movement of the stalks in the autumn wind carrying a different sound from the summer sound, drier and more restless, as if the grove itself is aware of the season turning. The floor of the grove is covered with fallen bamboo leaves, pale gold and brown, accumulated in drifts against the base of the stalks, making the ground soft and quiet underfoot. Small animals move through the grove, birds that shelter in the stalks, insects that live in the fallen leaves, the occasional fox or tanuki passing through on its way somewhere else. The grove borders the village on one side and the open hills on the other, and it has stood there for as long as anyone can remember, which in a village is a long time, long enough that the grove has become simply part of the landscape, as much a feature of the place as the river or the hills, not something that anyone thinks about particularly, but something whose absence would be immediately noticed and deeply felt. It is in this grove that an old man has worked for most of his life, cutting bamboo and selling it in the village for whatever purpose bamboo serves, building, crafts, household implements, the 1,001 uses that a material both strong and flexible and light finds in a world that has learned to make the most of what it has. Part 2. The Old Man. His name was Takatori no Okina, which means simply the old man who cuts bamboo, a name that describes what he does rather than who he is, in the way that names in old stories often work, identifying a person by their relationship to their work, as if the work and the person are the same thing, which perhaps they are, when the work has been done long enough and with enough attention. He was not young, and had not been young for a long time, and he had the particular quality of old people who have done physical work outdoors all their lives, a weathered solidity, a body that knows its own limits and works within them, a face that shows the years without being diminished by them. He rose before dawn, as he always had, and ate his simple breakfast in the dark, and took his tools and went into the grove before the light was fully established, working in the cool early morning hours before the day's heat arrived, moving through the familiar rows of bamboo, with the unhurried competence of someone who has done this so many times that the work has become a kind of knowledge that lives in the body rather than the mind. He knew the grove the way a person knows something they have spent a lifetime with, not just its physical dimensions and its particular stands and the quality of different sections, but its moods, its rhythms, the way it changed from season to season, and from morning to evening, and from calm days to windy ones. He lived with his wife in a small house at the edge of the grove, a house that had been in his family for generations, and that had the quality of old houses that have been lived in carefully, modest but not bare, practical but not without its small, comfortable details, the marks of a life lived in one place over a long time, visible in the worn places and the arranged things and the small accommodations that a house makes to the people who inhabit it over the years. His wife was of similar age and similar temperament, a woman who had spent her life in the ordinary work of keeping a household, the cooking and the cleaning and the tending of the small garden behind the house, the preservation of food for winter, the maintenance of the things that needed maintaining, and who brought to this work the same quality of steady, unhurried attention that her husband brought to the bamboo grove. They had no children, which was a sorrow that had been with them for a long time, long enough that it had settled into something quieter than grief, not acceptance exactly, but a kind of accommodation, a way of living with an absence that had been there so long it had become simply part of the shape of their life, the way a missing step on a staircase becomes simply a part of the staircase after enough years. They were content in the way that people are content when they have work that needs doing and the skill to do it and each other for company through the long evenings. And if the house was sometimes quieter than they would have liked, they did not speak of it much. Part 3. The Discovery. It was on an autumn morning, when the grove was full of the cool light of early autumn, and the leaves on the ground were just beginning to accumulate, that the old man found her. He had gone into the grove as usual, before full light, and was moving through a section of the grove where the bamboo grew particularly tall and straight, the stalks close together and very still in the windless early morning, when he noticed something that he had not seen before. A faint light emanating from one of the stalks ahead of him, not the reflected light of the dawn coming through the grove, but something else, something that came from inside the bamboo itself, a soft and steady glow that had the quality of moonlight, but was not moonlight, since the moon had set hours before. He stood and looked at it for a moment, and then he approached it carefully, the way he approached anything in the grove that was unfamiliar, slowly, with attention, without reaching conclusions before he had enough information to reach them. The stalk that held the light was indistinguishable from the stalks around it in every other way, the same height, the same color, the same smooth surface, but the light inside it was unmistakable, a warm and gentle radiance that was visible in the joints of the bamboo and in the thin walls of the stalk where the morning light came through at the right angle. Four. The child of light. He cut the stalk carefully, with the practiced ease of someone who has cut thousands of stalks and knows exactly how much pressure is required and at what angle. And when it opened, he found inside it a child, very small, no larger than his thumb, sitting in the hollow of the bamboo in a pool of the soft light that had drawn him to the stalk in the first place, looking up at him with eyes that were calm and clear and entirely unafraid. He stood for a long time looking at her, and she looked back at him, and the grove was very quiet around them, and the morning light was coming in at a low angle through the stalks, and the moment had the quality of things that happen only once, that cannot be prepared for and cannot be repeated, that simply arrive and must be received as they are. He took her home. He carried her carefully in his cupped hands, the way He would carry something small and precious and fragile, and he brought her to his wife, who received her in the same spirit of quiet wonder with which he had found her, not with questions about what this meant, or where she had come from, or what was to be done, but with the simple, practical tenderness of someone who has wanted a child for a long time and has been given one and is not going to waste time on questions that cannot be answered when there is a child who needs to be cared for. Part 5. The Growing. She grew with a speed that was not natural and yet felt entirely natural, as if the pace of her growth was simply appropriate to what she was. Not frightening, not disturbing, but fitting. The way things are fitting when they are exactly as they should be, even if they are not as expected. Within 3 months, she had grown to the size of a normal child, and within a year, she was indistinguishable, in outward appearance, from any other girl of her age in the village, except for the light, which remained subtle and almost imperceptible in ordinary daylight, but visible in the evenings, and on overcast days, a faint luminescence that the old man and his wife had grown so accustomed to that they no longer noticed it most of the time, the way you stop noticing the particular quality of light in a room you live in. They named her Kaguya Haim, the Shining Princess, a name that acknowledged what she was without making too much of it, the way practical people name things, accurately, without drama. She was from the beginning a child of unusual quality, not in the showy way of children who perform their unusualness for attention, but in the quieter way of children who are simply themselves, completely and without effort, in a way that makes the people around them feel that they are in the presence of something that is not quite ordinary, without being able to say exactly what it is. She was attentive and quiet, with the quality of attention that some children have of seeming to be fully present in whatever moment they are in, not distracted by what has just happened or what might happen next, but here, in this room, on this morning, with these particular people and this particular quality of light. She helped with the household work without being asked, in the natural way of a child who has grown up watching work being done and has absorbed its rhythms and its purposes without having to be taught them explicitly. She sat with the old woman in the evenings and learned to sew, her small fingers moving carefully over the cloth, her concentration complete, the work absorbing her in the way that good work absorbs people who were suited to it. She went with the old man sometimes into the bamboo grove, walking quietly beside him as he worked, asking questions with the focused curiosity of a child who genuinely wants to understand things and listens carefully to the answers, about the bamboo, about which cuts were best and why, about the way different sections of the grove grew differently, and what that told you about the soil and the water and the light. The old man answered these questions with the pleasure of someone who has spent a lifetime accumulating knowledge and rarely has the opportunity to share it, and the walks in the grove became something he looked forward to in a way he had not expected, a new thing in a life that had been, for a long time, mostly the same things in the same order. As the seasons turned and Kaguya Haim settled into the rhythms of the household, she developed her own particular relationship with the small world around the house, the garden, the grove, the path down to the village, the view of the hills from the Ingawa on clear days. The garden was her particular domain, tended with a care that went beyond what was strictly necessary and into something closer to devotion. She learned the names of everything that grew there, the seasonal vegetables and the herbs, and the few flowers that the old woman grew, not for any practical purpose, but simply because they were beautiful, and she tended them all with equal attention, giving to the practical the same quality of care she gave to the decorative, as if the distinction between them was not particularly important. She learned to preserve food for winter, sitting with the old woman through the long autumn afternoons making pickles and drying vegetables and storing rice, the work slow and repetitive, and strangely satisfying in the way that slow, repetitive work can be satisfying when you understand its purpose, that what you are doing now is providing for a future self who will be glad, in the cold of February, that the work was done carefully in October. She had a way with the small animals that came near the house, the birds that visited the garden, the occasional cat from the village that wandered up the path, a family of sparrows that nested under the eaves, that suggested a patience and a quality of presence that animals respond to, the kind that comes from being genuinely comfortable with stillness and genuinely undemanding of the creatures you encounter. She was curious about everything in a way that was not restless, but focused, the kind of curiosity that wants to understand things properly, that is not satisfied with surface knowledge, but wants to know how things work and why and what they connect to. She asked the old woman about the history of the village, the families that had been there for generations, the events that people still talked about, the ways that things had changed over the decades, and the ways they had stayed the same. And the old woman, who had a good memory and a storyteller's instinct for what was interesting, found that she had more to say than she had realized, that the history she carried in her head was more extensive than she had thought, summoned forth by the quality of Kaguya Haim's attention. She learned to read properly in those years, working through the texts that the old man had inherited from his father, practical texts about cultivation and crafts, and the management of land, with the focused attention she brought to everything, sometimes stopping to ask questions that showed she was not just reading the words, but thinking about what they meant and how they connected to things she already knew. In the evenings, sometimes she would go out to the garden alone, after the old man and his wife had gone in, and stand in the dark for a while looking at the sky, not at the moon specifically, or not always, but at the whole of it, the stars and the dark between the stars and the particular quality of the sky at night that is different from the sky in day, in ways that go beyond the mere presence or absence of light. The household. The house changed with her presence, as houses change when a child comes into them, not dramatically, not all at once, but in the small ways that accumulate over time into something that can be felt without being precisely identified. It was warmer in a way that had nothing to do with temperature, more inhabited, more fully itself, the rooms feeling more like rooms and less like spaces that simply contained furniture and the objects of daily life. The old woman moved through her days with a lightness she had not had before, her work taking on a quality of purpose that simple necessity had not quite given it. There was now someone for whom the meals were made, and the house was kept, someone whose presence gave the daily work a direction and a meaning that it had lacked. In the evenings, the three of them sat together in the main room by the small hearth, and the old man carved or mended tools, and the old woman sewed, and Kaguya Haim sat between them and worked at whatever work she had, sewing or weaving or simply reading, her presence in the room as natural and as necessary as the light from the lamp. They talked a little, as families do in the evenings, about the day, about small things, about nothing in particular, and the silences between the talking were comfortable in the way that silences are comfortable between people who know each other well enough not to need to fill them. Part 7. The Seasons. The seasons passed over the house and the grove and the three people in it with the unhurried regularity that seasons have, each one bringing its own qualities and its own work and its own particular beauty to the small world of the house and the grove. Winter came, and the bamboo in the grove bent under the weight of the snow until the stalks nearly touched the ground, and then released it in sudden cascades of white that made the grove sound, on quiet mornings, like a series of small polite punctuations in the general silence. The house was warm inside, the small hearth doing its work, and the three of them spent the long winter evenings in the close, comfortable way of people who have learned to be good company for each other in confined spaces, the work of their hands keeping them occupied while the cold pressed in from outside and the grove moved in the winter wind. Spring came gradually, as it always did, the snow pulling back from the south-facing slopes first, and then the paths, and then the grove floor, the bamboo righting itself as the weight left it, the new shoots pushing up through the softening ground, with the urgency that bamboo shoots have, adding inches in a day, startling in their speed after the long stillness of winter. Kaguya Haim watched the spring shoots with a particular attention, kneeling on the grove floor in the early mornings to look at them closely, as if the speed of their growth was something she found personally interesting, a fact about the world that connected to something she understood from the inside. The village below the grove knew of her, in the way that villages know of unusual things within their boundaries, through the accumulation of observations, the passed along comments of people who had seen her in the grove or on the path, the gradual building of a reputation that was, in her case, one of quiet unusualness rather than anything dramatic. People noted that she was beautiful, which was true, and that she had a quality about her that was difficult to name, something in the way she carried herself, and the way she looked at things that suggested she was perceiving the world slightly differently from how most people perceived it, not better or worse, but from a different angle, with a different quality of attention. The old man and his wife neither encouraged nor discouraged the village's interest in her, simply going on with their lives in the straightforward way that had always characterized them, neither making a performance of having an unusual child, nor trying to conceal what she was. Kaguya Hime herself moved through the village when she went there with the same quality of calm attention she brought to everything else, interested in what she saw, responsive to the people she met, but essentially self-contained in a way that did not invite intrusion and did not need approval, the way people are who are genuinely comfortable in themselves. The village, for its part, treated her with the mixture of wonder and practical acceptance that villages have always treated unusual things, acknowledging what was unusual and then getting on with the day, which is one of the more admirable qualities of people who live close to the land and have little patience for prolonged astonishment. Summer arrived with its heat and its long days and its particular smells, the green smell of the bamboo grove at full growth, the smell of the river nearby, the smell of the rice paddies in the fields below the village, all of it combining into the complex atmosphere of a Japanese summer that is unlike the summer smell of any other place. Kaguya Hime spent summer mornings in the grove with the old man, learning more of what he knew, asking her careful questions, accumulating a knowledge of bamboo that was becoming, by this point, genuinely substantial. She knew the difference between good and poor quality stalks by touch and by sound, knew the right time to cut for different purposes, knew the sections of the grove that produced the straightest stalks and those that produced the most flexible ones. The old man watched her learning with the quiet satisfaction of someone who has worried, without quite admitting it, that the knowledge they have spent a lifetime accumulating will die with them, and who now sees that it will not. Autumn came again, the second autumn since her arrival, the air cooling, the light changing, the leaves on the trees at the edge of the grove turning in their autumn way, and the bamboo taking on that quality of particular restlessness that it had in the autumn wind. It was in this second autumn that the old man first noticed the change in her, and understood, without wanting to, what it might mean. Part 8. The Moon. The change was subtle, and the old man was not sure, at first, whether he was seeing it or imagining it. A quality of distance in her eyes when she looked at the moon, which was full and bright in the autumn sky and visible from the grove through the gaps between the tall stalks. She had always been attentive to the moon, in the way that some people are attentive to it, stopping to look at it when it appeared above the tree line, noting its phases with a casual precision that suggested she tracked them without making a project of doing so. But now the attention was different, more concentrated, more personal, as if the moon were not simply something beautiful to look at, but something she had a relationship with, something that required her attention in a way that went beyond appreciation. On the nights of the full moon in the 8th and 9th months, she sat on the Engawa after dinner and looked at the moon for a long time, her face very still, her expression one that the old man could not quite read, not sad, not happy, but something that contained elements of both in a way that felt larger than either. He sat with her sometimes, on these evenings, not speaking, simply being present in the way that parents are sometimes present with children who are going through something that they cannot help with directly, but can accompany. Part the visitors. Word of her eventually reached beyond the village, as word of unusual things does, traveling along the paths of conversation and rumor and report that connect villages to towns and towns to the capital, growing in the telling as such things grow, acquiring embellishments and emphases that the original facts did not have, but that the imagination adds because it cannot help itself. Men came, men of rank and ambition and, in some cases, genuine feeling, and proposed marriage, and were declined, not unkindly but firmly, in the polite and unambiguous way of someone who knows her own mind, and does not need to apologize for it. She set them tasks, impossible tasks, or tasks so difficult as to amount to the same thing, not out of cruelty, but out of the understanding that she was not going to stay, that any promise of a future with her would be a promise she could not keep, and that it was kinder to give the impossible task than to give the false hope. The tasks went unaccomplished, and the men departed, and the house returned to its usual quiet, and the old man and his wife and Kaguya Haim sat in the evenings by the hearth as they always had, and the grove moved in the wind outside, and the ordinary life of the household went on in its ordinary way, which was, as it had always been, enough. She did not speak much about the visitors after they had gone, and neither did the old man and his wife, because the household had collectively understood, without discussing it, that the visitors were not the real story, and that the real story was the three of them, here, in this house, in these seasons. She told them one evening, in the direct and gentle way that she had always had of telling them difficult things, that she was not from this world, that she had come from the moon, sent here for reasons she did not fully understand, and that the time was approaching when she would need to return. She told them this not with drama, not with tears, but with the same quality of calm honesty with which she told them everything, clearly, completely, with a regard for their feelings that expressed itself in not minimizing what she was saying, but also in not drawing it out longer than was necessary. The old man sat and listened, and said nothing for a long time after she had finished. His wife wept, quietly, in the way of someone who has been expecting something, and is not surprised by it, and is not therefore undone by it, but is simply, genuinely, sad. Kaguya Jaime sat between them and held their hands, one in each of hers, and the three of them sat in the autumn evening with the moon rising above the bamboo grove, and the sound of the grove moving in the night wind, coming in through the open shoji, and there was nothing to say that was adequate to the moment. So they did not try to say it, simply remaining together in the difficulty of what was true. Part 9. The Last Days. The time that remained was short, and they spent it the way people spend time that is short and known to be short, with a quality of attention that ordinary time does not have, each day carrying more weight than a day usually carries, each small thing done together, taking on a significance that small things do not usually have. They continued their routines because routines are how people hold on to the shape of their days when the shape of their lives is changing, and because the routines were themselves a form of love. The meals prepared and eaten together, the evenings by the hearth, the walks in the grove, all of it continuing, all of it the same and all of it different, because they were now doing it while knowing it would end. Kaguya Hime walked in the bamboo grove every morning that week, going to the places she had always gone, touching the stalks she had always touched, standing in the sections of the grove where the light came through in the ways she had learned to love. She went with the old man on his morning rounds, not asking questions as she usually did, but simply accompanying him, her presence beside him quiet and complete, and he worked in his usual way, and she watched in her usual way, and neither of them said much, because there was nothing to say that was better than the silence of simply being together in the place they had both loved. The old woman spent those days doing the things she had always done, but with a deliberateness that was new, making the foods that Kaguya Hime liked best, tending to the small details of the house with an attention that was partly love and partly the need to do something with the feeling that had no other outlet. She mended the girls' clothes and washed them and folded them and put them away, and then thought about this and felt the particular sadness of practical acts that have become suddenly unnecessary. In the evenings, she taught Kaguya Hime the last of what she knew about sewing, the more difficult techniques she had been saving, the patterns she had learned from her own mother, holding the girls' hands and guiding them through the stitches with the patient care of someone who wants to give everything they have before it is too late to give it. Kaguya Hime received all of this with the same grace with which she received everything, fully, without deflecting, without false reassurance, but with a quality of presence that made the people giving to her feel that what they were giving was genuinely received, genuinely appreciated, genuinely worth the giving. The moon grew fuller through those days, and the nights grew cooler, and the bamboo moved in the autumn wind outside the house, and the household continued in its ways, and the time passed in the quiet and necessary way that time passes when it is carrying something toward its end. The autumn evenings in that last year had a quality to them that the old man thought about afterward, not a quality of sadness, though sadness was present, but something more complex, a richness that came from knowing that what was there would not always be there, that the particular combination of the three of them in this house, in this season, was something that existed in a limited quantity, and was being spent, evening by evening, toward its end. They played games sometimes, in the evenings. Simple games, with stones, or cards, that the old man had known since childhood, and that Kaguya Hime had learned quickly and played with the focused attention she brought to everything. And the games were themselves, not the point, but the companionable sitting together, the small conversations that arose around the games, the laughter that came occasionally from something unexpected, were the point, and all of it was more vivid than it would have been if they had not known it was running out. The old woman made special foods in those weeks, the things she made only for occasions, the dishes that required more time and care than ordinary meals, and that were therefore a form of celebration, an acknowledgement that what was happening deserved to be marked, and they ate them together in the autumn evenings by the light of the lamp, and the food was good, and the company was good, and the feeling of being together in a warm house while the autumn wind moved through the grove outside was good in the way that only things that are not permanent can be good, which is fully and without reserve. Part 10. The Night of the Full Moon. The night came when it was time, as nights like that always do, with a clarity and a stillness that felt deliberate, as if the world had arranged itself to be present for what was happening. The moon was full and very bright, the largest moon of the autumn, the harvest moon that farmers watch for and poets write about, and its light was strong enough to cast shadows in the bamboo grove, and to turn the dew on the grass silver, and to make the whole small world of the house and the grove look as if it had been remade in a purer and more luminous version of itself. They ate dinner together, the three of them, a simple meal made with care, and they talked a little about ordinary things in the way that people sometimes talk about ordinary things, when the extraordinary is pressing in on all sides, because ordinary things are real and present and a comfort, and because talking about them is a way of saying that the life they have lived together has been, in its ordinary way, good. After dinner, they sat on the Ngawa in the moonlight, the three of them in a row, and looked at the grove, and the sky, and the moon above it, and the grove moved in the night wind, with its familiar sound, and the moonlight lay across the bamboo floor in long pale lines, and the night was very beautiful and very still. Part 11. The Departure. When the time came, it came gently, a change in the quality of the light, a sense of movement in the high air above the grove that was not the wind, and then a brightness that descended from the direction of the moon, soft and steady, pooling around the house and the grove with the quality of the light that had been inside the bamboo stalk on the morning the old man had found her. Kaguya Haim stood, and the old man and his wife stood with her, and she turned to them and said what she needed to say, which was not much, because the important things between them had been said over the years, in the ways that important things are usually said, not in words, but in the accumulated evidence of care and attention and presence, in the meals and the evenings, and the walks and the teachings, and the quiet, companionable sitting in the grove. She told them that she was grateful, that the years with them had been the best of what she had known here, that she would carry them with her in whatever way carrying was possible where she was going. The old man held her hands for a moment, and his wife held her for a moment longer, and then Kaguya Haim turned and walked toward the light, and the light received her, and she rose into the autumn sky above the bamboo grove, moving toward the moon that was bright and full and waiting above the hills. The old man and his wife watched until she was gone, and then they stood in the moonlight for a while longer, not moving, the grove quiet around them and the night very large and very still. Part 12. After. They went inside eventually, the old man and his wife, when the cold of the night had settled in enough to make standing outside impractical, and they sat by the hearth in the quiet of the house, and did not say much, because there was not much to say that was adequate, and they both knew it. The house was the same house it had always been, and the things in it were the same things, but the quality of the air in the rooms was different in a way that was hard to describe. Not empty, not cold, but changed, the way a room changes when someone who has been in it for a long time leaves it, taking with them not just their presence, but some particular quality of the atmosphere that had been there because of them. The old man went to the grove the next morning, as he always did, before full light, and he walked through it in his usual way and did the work that needed doing, and the grove was the same grove it had always been. The same stalks, the same light, the same sounds, and also different, in the way that familiar places become different when something has changed in how you see them. He found himself stopping sometimes, in the sections of the grove where she had walked beside him, and simply standing for a moment in the particular quality of light there, not thinking anything in particular, simply being present in a place that was present to him in a new way. His wife tended the house with the same care she had always brought to it, and the meals were the same meals, and the evenings were the same evenings in their outward form, and if she sometimes sat in the evenings, in the place where Kaguya had sat, doing her sewing in the same pool of lamplight, it was not out of sadness exactly, but out of a kind of continuation, keeping the shape of the thing even when the thing itself had changed, the way people keep the habits of those they have loved after those people are gone, as a form of memory and as a form of gratitude. The autumn continued around them, and the winter came, and the bamboo bent under the snow again, as it had bent the winter before, and the household went on in its ways, and time passed, and the loss became part of the shape of their life, the way things do when they have been given enough time to settle. They looked at the moon more than they had before, both of them, on the nights when it was visible and bright, not with grief, or not only with grief, but with a quality of attention that had not been there before, the attention of people who know that the moon is not simply the moon. On the night of the full moon, in the 8th month of each year, they sat on the Ngawa together and looked at it for a long time without speaking, which was its own form of commemoration, its own form of keeping. Part 13. The Bamboo and the Gold. There is one other thing the story tells about the old man and the bamboo grove, a thing that belongs to the time after Kaguya came to live with them, and that is worth telling because it says something true about the way that good fortune works in old stories, not as a reward exactly, and not as something earned, but as a kind of overflow, a spilling out of abundance into the ordinary world, from something that is not ordinary. In the months after he found her, the old man noticed that the bamboo he cut had changed in some of its sections, that certain stalks, when he cut them, contained not the usual hollow interior, but something else, a warmth that he could feel through the walls of the stalk, and sometimes a faint gleam that resolved, when he opened the stalk, into a small quantity of gold, lying in the hollow the way water lies in a vessel, simply there, without explanation. He did not understand this, and did not try to, in the same way that he had not tried to understand the child in the bamboo, accepting it as part of the same dispensation, the same quiet generosity of something he could not name, but was grateful for. The gold was enough, over the months, to ease the life of the household considerably, not to make them rich, but to remove the particular anxiety of people who have always had enough, but have never had more than enough, who have always known that the margin between sufficiency and difficulty was narrow. And so the story of the shining princess settles into the autumn stillness, like moonlight settling onto the bamboo grove, like the last of the autumn leaves coming to rest on the quiet ground. She was real, in whatever way such things are real. Real as the light inside the bamboo was real. Real as the care of the old man and his wife was real. Real as the grief of losing her and the gratitude of having had her, both of which are real, and both of which are true, and neither of which cancels the other. Stories like this one carry something true in them about the things that come into our lives from outside the ordinary, that arrive unexpectedly, stay for a time that is never long enough, change everything about the shape of our days while they are with us, and leave behind, when they go, something that is different from what was there before they came. They carry something true about care, about the way that caring for something, tending to it with attention and patience over time, creates a connection that is real and lasting even when the thing itself is gone. The way the grove still holds the memory of her presence in its particular quality of light on certain mornings. They carry something true about the moon, about the way it has always been there above the ordinary world, patient and bright, belonging to something larger than any of the stories we tell about it, and yet somehow present in all of them. Let these things rest in you now. You have traveled tonight through the autumn countryside of old Japan, through a bamboo grove and a small house, and the quiet seasons of a life that was changed, gently and completely, by something that came from the light inside a bamboo stalk and returned, in the end, to the light that had sent it. The bamboo grove is still there, as bamboo groves are, growing, always growing, pushing new stalks up through the autumn soil, the old stalks standing tall and the new ones rising beside them, the light coming through the layered leaves in its particular shifting way, the grove making its familiar sound in the autumn wind. The moon is still there above it, as it has always been, patient and bright, moving through its phases with the unhurried regularity of something that has been doing this for longer than the grove has been growing, and longer than anyone who has looked at it has been alive to look. The old man and his wife are still there in the story, sitting on their ngawa in the autumn evening, looking at the moon together in the quiet way of people who know something about it that most people do not, and who carry that knowledge gently without making too much of it, the way you carry things that are both precious and private. Let it all soften now, the bamboo grove in the autumn wind, the moonlight on the grove floor, the small warm house at the edge of the trees, the light that came from inside the bamboo on an autumn morning and filled the house for the years. It stayed, the autumn sky and the full moon rising above the hills, patient and bright and very far away, and somehow, in the way of things that are very far away and very old, close. Let it dissolve gently, like morning mist in the bamboo grove, like the soft light of an autumn moon fading at dawn. There is nothing left to hold tonight, nothing to figure out, nothing to carry. You are warm and you are still, and you are exactly where you should be. The bamboo is patient. The moon is kind tonight. Let your breathing slow. Let the quiet take you. Rest well. Sleep well. Good night.